What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. It's Thursday, time to go game by game, talk about all the players I'm be starting and sitting this week. Gonna be a long one, so sit back, hit the like button. Let's get things started off with 49ers at Seahawks, very high 49-point total. 49ers, 3.5-point road favorites. For the 49ers, Seattle, fairly neutral matchup all around, but they're better for wide receivers. They're better for running backs than wide receivers, and at Seattle is still a difficult game environment to play in, so I wouldn't call this a very positive matchup for anyone. Ayuk came back to life this last week, 12 targets, 147 receiving yards. Also, it wasn't like 100% the squeaky wheel narrative, which, for wide receivers is they're not getting the targets, they get frustrated, and the team just peppers them with targets the following week. Wasn't really that. He only had one more first read target than Debo, one more than Juwan Jennings, but he was by far the best at separating, had the best win rate on the team. So even though he wasn't the first read a lot of the time, he was just winning like he's been doing all season, and the ball finally went his way this week. That's a positive thing if you have Brandon Ayuk, because if it was just like squeaky wheel, it was just every play they're like, all right, fine, we'll just kind of pepper him with targets. This is his week, and then we'll go back to doing other things. If that was the case, that wouldn't be good for his long-term potential. He's just been getting open. He continued to get open, and the team is realizing this. The team is forcing him the ball a little bit more often because he's been wide open. So it's a positive for his long-term potential. Also a good matchup for Ayuk. Seattle plays the 8th most man coverage in the league. Ayuk is their man beater. Debo is more of their zone beater. Regardless, I think both Debo, Ayuk are strong plays this week. You're probably playing both of them. Mason, Kittle, I'd call them must starts. And then Purdy, my quarterback 9 this week, same as always, projects well, doesn't have an insane ceiling, but honestly, a quarterback this season, someone who's projecting always as that quarterback 10 or so, is someone you should probably be starting. For the Seahawks, the 49ers are a negative matchup, but aren't like an impossible defense to beat. Geno has looked really good at times this year, and we like him a lot in games where he's going to be forced to throw the ball more. They already throw the ball at a pretty high rate, but when they fall behind, when they're forced to be aggressive, we really like the Seattle passing attack as field goal home underdogs. I would expect elevated pass play rates for them this week. He grades out as my quarterback 11 right now. Behind him, Ken Walker. He's a must start whenever he's healthy, as is DK Metcalf. The offense kind of disappointed overall last week, but those two are ones I couldn't really see myself ever benching. JSN, Lockett, a little bit different story, less volume for both of them. They're both kind of lower end flex plays this week. I'm not really expecting either one of them to go off, but as I said before, Seattle is probably going to have to lean a little bit more pass heavy this week. And so I could see one of them racking up 5, 6, 7 receptions, turning that into 60, 70 yards, adding a touchdown, which would obviously be a very solid day for them. So I think both need a touchdown. I don't think both are overly likely to score, but you could definitely play either one of them in the flex if you had to. Sunday games kick off in London. So again, remember that's a 9:30 Eastern kickoff. Set your lineup the night before, wake up early on Sunday, do something to make sure your player's not out and you have the right lineup that you want to be starting, and put those players into the positional spots. So don't play anyone in the flex. If they are running back, play them at running back. If they are a wide receiver, play them at wide receiver. This week it is Jaguars at Bears, which is kind of unfair to the Bears since it's effectively going to be a home game for the Jaguars. The Jaguars always play in London, so there's a ton of fans in London that are Jaguars fans, yet the Bears are the ones that have to count it for their home game this season. Again, not super fair, but it is what it is. Anyways, this one has a 45-point total, so relatively decent. Bears 2-point favorites. For the Jaguars, no one projects that well. The Bears have an elite defense. They're not a defense we ever really want to attack. They are most attackable on the ground, but you've got Etienne and Tank Bigsby kind of splitting the work there, and so it makes it tougher to trust either one of them. We were all over Brian Thomas Jr. last week. This is like the polar opposite matchup. It is not an appealing matchup. Right now, Etienne's my running back 15. Tank is my running back 38. Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver 28. Christian Kirk, wide receiver 39. So as you can see, playable. All of them could be played in starting lineups, but none of them project amazingly. I could honestly see the split between Etienne and Tank getting a little bit closer if we get any sort of coach speak saying some more volume is going Tank Bigsby's way. And again, Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver 28. you can play that for sure. Just it's, again, not nearly as good of a spot as it was last week. As you guys know, I go through like a massive rankings update on Thursdays, and I mean each day after that as well, but a huge one on Thursdays. It's a spot where I could see it improving a little bit for Jacksonville, but not one where I'm like, oh, I missed this. We're definitely playing all these guys. It's a good defense against the Bears, so we're not really trying to attack anything on the Jaguars. Then for the Bears side, Jaguars have a trash defense, so wheels up for their offense. Swift has been playing a lot better as of late, up to 11th in expected points per game, 15th in actual points per game on the season. So playing as a running back too, I would just keep riding him while he's hot and really while the matchups remain good, because it's not like he's been incredible. It's just like he's running into these insane matchups every single week. When they start to get into like poor running back matchups, maybe we can pull off. But if he's going to keep getting great matchups, we're going to keep playing him. And then the Bears wide receiver trio, it's set up really well this week, as is Caleb Williams. He's a great streaming option. DJ Moore's a must start. Allen Odunze, they're only grading out as flex plays right now. That's a spot where if it's close between Keenan Allen and someone else, Odunze and someone else, I would probably lean towards Allen, towards Odunze, because the spot is good. I don't think like all three of these pass catchers are going off, but I think DJ Moore's a good game, and I think one of Keenan Allen or Rome Odunze is going to put together a pretty solid week. And if that's going to happen to one of them, it makes both of them pretty strong plays, because you got like a 50-50 chance that they're going to have a decent outing. And I don't think either one of them is going to post like 1 for 10. Like, I think the matchup is good enough, and I think they're going to do well enough through the air that all of them are at least going to be okay. So again, as a tiebreaker, I'd lean towards them. Jaguars are giving up the most EPA per pass play. I have the Jacksonville graded out as the number 2 matchup, a number 2 fantasy matchup for wide receivers. So again, they're in a very good spot. 1 o'clock games kick off with Bucs at Saints. Very low. Low. I don't want to say very low. 41.5 point total. Bucs 3.5 point road favorites. Line has shifted. I believe it opened as Saints as favorites, at least like, back in the day it opened like that. But since we know the Carr injury, right, that's not something people were predicting a week ago when lines kind of first came out. It shifted from like 3 points favorite for Saints to 3 points favorites for the Bucs. So the Vegas is kind of anticipating around a touchdown, maybe less than a touchdown is what Carr is worth, versus Rattler, probably. I mean, we don't actually know 100% who's starting. I would imagine they start Spencer Rattler, but we will see. I haven't got an official word for that. On the Bucs side, the Saints are a decent matchup for wide receivers, but fairly neutral for everyone else. There's a lot of variance to this game, and that's going to impact game script, and that's going to impact how well everyone does in fantasy. Rattler looked good in the preseason, but he's also a 5th round rookie wide receiver. And again, I'm not even 100% sure he's the one getting the start. I'm just going to talk about him in this one because I feel like he probably is. But there's a world where, I mean, he played well in the preseason. There's a world where he plays well this week. It's not like Derek Carr is some elite quarterback, right? So it's not like the drop down is going from, Patrick Mahomes down to Zach Wilson, right? There's not a huge drop off in this spot. So there's a world where he plays well. The Saints do enough to where the Bucs need to stay aggressive all game. But there's also a chance he falls apart, that the Bucs defense has 2 pick sixes, right? And that they can just go conservative in the second half, which would obviously hurt for their skill players. Regardless of what the outcome ends up being process-wise, I think you're just playing Evans, you're playing Godwin. They should be in starting lineups every week. They're just playing too well right now to really bench either one of them. At running back, I think they're both flex plays in my eyes. If I had to guess one of these outcomes, I do think Rattler will do well enough to where this game is remotely close to where the Bucs are staying aggressive, but that the Bucs are winning, and so they can lean on these running backs in the second half. Not to the extent where it's like, we're up 3 touchdowns or running the ball every play, but enough to where it's like, we have a commanding lead. We're not going to be aggressive. We are going to use these running backs. So if you had to use them in the flex, I'd be totally fine doing that. And then Baker, you probably would need the competitive game for Baker to have a great game. But to be honest, I think that can happen. And he's been playing well enough every week that if you've been streaming Baker, it's the same thing we talked about last week. If you've been doing it, you've been playing him every week, why change? Why change at this point? It's a good enough matchup, good enough spot. They're favorites. I would just keep playing him. And then Cade, my tight end, 12 on the week. He's playing every snap. He's one of two tight ends getting at least 95% of their team's tight end volume. He can definitely run into a good game. He could score a touchdown. So if you're streaming tight end, he's a good option. Then for the Saints side, Kamara's a must start. Doesn't matter who's playing there. But note that Carr is, the check down king. And so it's definitely possible. We see the receiving volume drop for Kamara, but again, still have to play him. And then Olave, Shaheed, they're like low-end wide receiver twos. As we discussed last week, the Chiefs were a much better matchup for Shaheed than they were Olave. So it's not surprising we saw Olave struggle. We again don't really know what we're going to get at quarterback with terms of like the level of play here. So I think there's obvious risk in either one of them. Neither one are must starts. But again, Derek Carr is not that good of quarterback. And so he also checks down, like I said, at a pretty high rate. And so maybe some of these check downs turn into targets for the wide receivers. Maybe the drop in efficiency is marginal at best. And so if anything, if I had Olave, I had Shaheed, I'd be a little bit excited about Rattler. I mean, some people have been excited about his potential. I don't think he's going to go out there and be a breakout quarterback. But there's a world here where he plays well enough to where Derek Carr is bench rest of the season. Again, also a world where he plays terrible and we're like, when is Derek Carr coming back? So there's variance here, but I don't know. I'd be a little bit excited. If you had Olave, it hasn't been going great with Carr, so why not be excited about the potential with him? They're both in that like low 20s for wide receivers. Next up, we've got Cardinals at Packers, 47.5 point total. Packers, 5-point home favorites. For the Cardinals, the Packers are a strong matchup for tight ends, fairly neutral across the board everywhere else. We pretty much know where the volume is going for the Cardinals. And so the Packers aren't like such a strong defense to where it's like can't play these guys. Like we know where the ball is going. So even when they have poor games, it's at least fine. We also know that the Packers are obviously a good offense. And so they're going to push the Cardinals. So there's not really an outcome here where the Cardinals get up by multiple scores and they don't do anything. I suppose there's a world where they just like fall on their face like they did against the Commanders and no one does that great. But I would say the likelihood here is that because they're so condensed, you're starting Kyler, you're starting Marv, you're starting Trey McBride, and I think you're starting James Conner as well. None of them grade out as smash plays, but all grade out well enough to where it's like, you better have a really good team if you're benching these guys. And then Michael Wilson, as we talked about last week, he continues to play really well. The volume just isn't high enough for me to trust him as anything more than like, a deeper league play. If you're in a very competitive 12-team league that has like 3 wide receiver spots or maybe 2 wide receiver, 2 flex spots, or maybe a 14-team league, that's when I'd start leaning towards Michael Wilson because I do think he's a good player and he has an okay role. 8, 10-team league, 12-team league where you have a pretty good team. You probably don't have to play him. Then for the Packers, I would assume that Romeo Doubs is back this week. He was practicing on Wednesday. I don't think he'll be suspended again. If there was a squeaky wheel narrative, it would be here, right? For a wide receiver literally being suspended because they're so upset they're not getting targets. So wouldn't be shocked if we saw the first drive of the game, Romeo Doubs exits with like 3 for 40 and a touchdown. Like that wouldn't shock me at all. But it's tough to project high volume for him because they just do have so many playmakers, and Arizona is a negative matchup for wide receivers overall. I think Jacobs, Jayden Reed, must starts. Love, always a very strong start. I think you're just playing him if you got him. Kraft, a very strong play yet again at tight end. And then you got Wicks and Dobbs, low-end flex plays. Wicks has left 1 million fantasy points on the field with all of these drops. Like he's getting open. He's a good wide receiver. He gets open. He runs good routes. Just can't catch the ball. He's got stone hands right now. So it's too early to tell if this is just like a bad stretch that he's going through or if he legitimately has stone hands and like we just cannot trust him at all. I just think it's too early to know the true answer there. But you can't keep dropping passes. I don't care if you're getting open. If you're going to drop this level of passes, it's like, and it's not even like pure drops because sometimes they won't grade them out as drops, but he had a few plays last week where it was like, maybe it wasn't a drop, but like, catch the ball, like it's not that hard to come down with it. So we'll see if they keep going to him, if that continues. But for right now, while I don't think Christian Watson's going to return this week. If Christian Watson returns, I don't know that I would trust any of those 3, Dobbs, Wicks, or Watson. You'd just be playing Wicks or you'd just be playing Jayden Reed. But assuming that Watson misses another game, I think you can go to those 2 in the flex. But it's lower end flex plays. Next up, we've got Colts at Titans, 43-point total. Colts 1-point road favorites. For the Colts, my guess is that Anthony Richardson starts this week. He said he's feeling a lot better. I would think he plays, but check the practice reports on Thursday, on Friday. Those are going to be the most telling. Brutal matchup, though, against this Titans defense. They're also coming off by the Titans, and so that's not great. They've had a lot of time to prepare. They're a little bit healthier. We really like the Colts passing attack last week in a smash matchup. Things are completely reversed this week. No matter who the quarterback ends up being, we're not projecting good things for this passing attack. Downs, Pittman, they're grading out 36th and 39th right now. And even if we project Jonathan Taylor out, Trey Sermon, a very touchdown-dependent, low-end running back too. You're mostly just avoiding the Colts this week if you can, but if Anthony Richardson is going to start and you don't have another option, he'd be fine to play. I know a lot of you have the combination of Richardson and Sam Darnold, which I think is going to be great to close the season. And really just after this week, because I think Sam Darnold is going to be a great option, and you can just basically sit on Anthony Richardson if he happens to start breaking out. But for this week, Sam Darnold is on bye, and you kind of don't want to roster 3 quarterbacks. So I get that's a difficult position. If Richardson plays, I would rather play him, take on that risk instead of rostering that 3rd quarterback, because now you're probably dumping multiple bench players that you'd really like to have as stashes. If Richardson is out and Darnold's on bye, you kind of have to, because I don't really want to drop Richardson. But yeah, if he plays and you're in that position, I think you got to just play him, even if there's a solid option on free agency, unless you've got like 7 bench spots. You're like, Nick, honestly, I'm in a semi-competitive league, but like there's options for me if I can drop this guy and pick someone else up. If that's the case where you're not like too dependent on those bench spots, sure, roster 3 quarterbacks for 1 week. But please just don't drop Sam Darnold in any scenario. He's going to be great when he returns. Titans, it's a good matchup, especially for the running backs, but also for wide receivers getting downfield. Only the Rams have allowed more rushing yards than the Colts, and the Colts grade out as the number 1 matchup for fantasy running backs, just slightly ahead of the Panthers. Exceptional spot for Tony Pollard. He should be in starting lineups. Spears, honestly, he projects as running back 31. If you had to roll with him, you're like, Nick, I got injuries, I got buys, I got to roll with him. Fine. In the flex spot, low-end running back too. It's a good enough matchup where I think he can do pretty well. As to the wide receivers, as we discussed the last 2 weeks, great matchup for outside wide receivers that can get deep downfield. Pickens hit. Then we have Brian Thomas Jr. hit. I could see Calvin Ridley hitting this week. I don't have as much confidence in that given the quarterback play, but Ridley has run by far the most routes on the outside on this team, although it's worth noting that Hopkins has been more efficient than Ridley. He's earned targets at a better rate as well. We know that he was not 100% to start the season after their bye. I would imagine now he's much closer to or is 100% healthy. So kind of a sneaky play this week. Neither project really well in my first round of projections. To be fair, the volume they've seen so far this season justifies a low projection for both of them, but I could see a world where I kind of go back into the projections and like, given the matchup here, boosting them a little bit, I can see them both getting into like flex plays, ideally 3rd wide receiver, ideally 2nd flex. But if you had to play either one of them in the flex spot, I do think one has a good game. I don't know which one it's going to be, but if you want to take a chance on that, I think one of them does have a good game. And so I think you can play both in the flex. Browns at Eagles. Up next, 42.5-point total. Eagles 9-point home favorites, given how poorly Deshaun Watson has played this season. For the Browns, the Eagles are the 6th consecutive below average to average defense that they have faced, but it hasn't mattered through the first 5 weeks. So I'm not overly optimistic that they're going to like all of a sudden take advantage this week. Also coming off bye for the Eagles, so maybe they put things together a little bit more on defense. It's another elite spot for wide receivers. So Cooper, strong flex play. Judy, lower end flex play, but still possible to play more in deeper formats, I would say, for him. And Njoku was limited in his return last week, but I would imagine it's a ramp-up situation. I don't remember the exact amount, but he played, like 40, 50% of the snaps. I would imagine he's ramped up a little bit more this week, and then maybe next week to kind of fully unleash him. Unless you added someone like Tucker Kraft, I'd rather play over Njoku. If you drafted Njoku, you've been streaming, and you're not super pumped with the streaming options because, tight end's a wasteland, I would probably just roll with Njoku and kind of hope that this is when they unleash him. good enough spot here. They're going to be trailing. They're going to be throwing. I would play David Njoku this week. Only other play here is Jerome Ford. He's just a low-end running back too. He ranks outside the top 20 running backs in expected points per game. A lot lower of a ceiling than we had hoped entering the season, just because they're rotating running backs a little bit more than we thought they would. And as I said, Deshaun Watson has been terrible at quarterback, and that obviously flows over to the running backs. For the Eagles, it's easy. Start Jalen Hurts, start Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert. Bench everyone else. Next up, we've got Texans at Patriots. Low, 38-point total. Texans, 7-point road favorites. For the Texans, Mixon still has not practiced as of Wednesday. If he's not out there Thursday, I would assume that he's not going to play, but watch Thursday, watch Friday. Theoretically, he would only need to practice on Friday to play. But again, I'm assuming he's going to miss another week. He's missed a lot more time than expected. I think they're kind of kicking themselves for not placing him on the IR. You'd have to think, though, that he's closer, right? This was not expected to be a super long-term injury, so I would think he returns next week, but hopefully it's this week. If he does miss again, honestly, I don't trust either one of Akers or Goombawale in this spot. Dare took over as a lead back last week, was wildly inefficient. He needed 21 touches to score 11.7 half PPR points. In this spot, I just don't really want to be playing them. This is not a good game, right? Nico's out, so the wide receivers are going to be better, right? Diggs is a strong start. Tank Dell is more of a low-end wide receiver too. I don't know who Christian Gonzalez is going to cover. I don't know if he's going to shadow one of them, and I don't know if it's going to be like a split. They're going to be like, well, Diggs, Tank, they're kind of like even, and so let's just play defense, and whoever you end up guarding this play, you'll shut him down, but we don't need you to shadow any one specific wide receiver. I don't know what will happen. Maybe, though, they say, well, Tank Dell's a bigger threat, and that we think we can kind of like slow down Diggs enough to where like Diggs doesn't get the ball deep downfield. So even if Diggs is kind of peppered with targets, if you stop Tank Dell and you force them to win with Diggs, maybe you force them to drive down the field very slowly, and that kind of, just limits the amount of times they can score touchdowns on you. That would make sense to me. So not great if you have Tank Dell, because again, I don't think they shadow Diggs with them. But anyways, it's just not a great game, right? It's a 38-point total. Even though a lot of the points are on the Texans side, I could see this playing out slow. I could see this playing out lower scoring. I could see the total being like 30 points. So it's not a good spot. It's not a spot I want to invest in as a tiebreaker. But again, having Nico gone just opens up so much of a target share that if you have Diggs, if you have Dell, this is the opportunity you were looking for when you drafted them, having Nico out. And so you're probably playing them, but no one else is appealing. Even CJ Stroud is not an appealing play this week, and don't play the Titans. Then for the Patriots, Drake May is starting. This is the exact week we predicted preseason when he would be starting. That change matters more, I think, long-term than this week. This week, nothing changes. I mean, there's a chance, obviously, that they're more efficient, but like for fantasy, for our purposes, like process-wise, watch it play out for a week. See what happens. I think he's going to look good. I think he's going to look better than a lot of people expect. But I don't think he's going to go out there and be, a top 12 quarterback or anything. I think he'll be like a top 20 quarterback, like in that 15 to 20 kind of range. I think for streaming, long-term, not this week. Again, it's his first start. We're probably not streaming Drake May, but he's going to run the ball a lot more than a lot of people are assuming. So we will stream him in the future. We will look to Polk. We will look to Kendrick Bourne. For right now, though, I just wouldn't really play any of those guys. I'd play Stevenson as like a low-end running back too, because this also helps him, just if the offense can improve. But again, it's a 38-point total, and they're home, and they're still 7-point underdog. So it's not a good spot for anyone on the Patriots. Final 1 o'clock game is going to be Commanders at Ravens. Very high, 51.5-point total. Ravens, 6.5-point home favorites. For the Commanders, at Baltimore is obviously not a fun place to play, but this game has over a 50-point total for a reason. Both sides can put up points quickly, and even though Baltimore has a great defense, the Commanders, I mean, it's crazy to say, but Commanders have a fantastic offense. They're a very, very efficient offense. I am very surprised with how good they have been this season, and it's not a fluke. They are a very good offense. Daniels must start. McLaurin, you're probably playing him, but strong play at wide receiver 2. I could see benching him if you have a sick wide receiver core, but you're probably playing him. Ertz, honestly, find a stream. He is 9th in expected points per game over the last month. He actually has the one positive matchup on the team. So Baltimore is obviously a very good defense, as we said. very strong against wide receivers, but because they're so good against running backs, wide receivers, some more gets funneled to tight ends. No ceiling for Ertz, but could he rack up 5 for 60? Absolutely. Gets into the end zone. That's a good game. As for the running backs, both are more flex plays this week. We're expecting a trailing game script for the Commanders. It's not a good efficiency spot. It's a high total, but the total is more on the Baltimore side. So there will be weeks where we're expecting more points to come from the Commanders. I don't know that you're playing them this week, but if you played one, it is Brian Robinson. I think both are fine, but for the most part, you're playing Daniels, you're playing McLaurin. If you have to play Robinson, you can. If you want to stream Ertz, other than that, you're probably benching Commanders players. Then for the Ravens, a great spot. They're at home. They're playing a poor defense, exceptionally high total, and a lot of that total is on your side. Lamar, Henry, Flowers, must starts. Flowers, again, is game script dependent. In those games where they win in blowouts, he is not going to have a good game if he doesn't score early. But I think they understand that the Commanders are a good team, that they can come back. And I think they are a good enough team to where Baltimore's not going to get up by like 20, 24 points. And so I think Flowers should be in your starting lineup. Then likely Andrews, fine to stream, but that's what they are. And as we go over every week with the Commanders have a poor defense, but the one thing they are good at stopping is tight ends. So neither one of those two is a great play this week. You're going to need a touchdown. 4 o'clock games kick off with Chargers at Broncos. Lowest total game of the week, 35.5 points. Chargers 3-point road favorites coming off of their bye. For the Chargers, no one's a must play. No one is a strong play. Dobbins, running back 21. Ladd, wide receiver 32. I don't think so. Surtain mostly plays on the outside, so I don't think Surtain is going to shadow Ladd McConkey. And if he doesn't, given how Ladd's also a man beater, right? So we want to be playing him against defenses that play a lot of man. The Broncos play a ton of man coverage, as we went over last week with Brock Bowers. It's also a good spot for Ladd. Get a good spot, right? Like, it's not a spot where they're playing a poor defense and we're like, let's go, they're going to score 30 points. It's a spot where it's like things should funnel to Ladd, you would think. And so coming off their bye, this is a rookie coming off bye, closing in on the second half of the season. This is the spot where if there was a breakout week for Ladd so far in the season, this is easily the most likely. So I could see Ladd going out there having like 8 for 100 and a touchdown. Everyone being like, oh my goodness, is he a must start every week? Is he the new Keenan Allen? That could happen. So not predicting it because this is the Broncos and this is at Denver, but it's a good spot for Ladd McConkey. But yeah, even counting the quarterbacks, no player on this offense is averaging more than 10.8 expected points per game. So Ladd's the one you want, and Dobbins is the running back you want, but no one is a must start on this team. Then for the Broncos, honestly, a similar story. Javonte, Sutton, those are the only 2 players seeing enough volume to where you really want to play them. But how much do you want to play them, even at home, as underdogs in the lowest total game of the week, one of the lowest total games you'll see all season? They're both definitely going to need a touchdown. If you had to play them, you can, but they only have like a 30-35% chance of scoring that touchdown. So most of the time, 65-75% of the time, 65-70% of the time, they're not going to be that great of plays, not overly appealing. And speaking of unappealing, our next game also is a gross total. Steelers at Raiders, as you can predict, not going to be a great game. 36.5 point total. Steelers 3-point road favorites. For the Steelers, Najee and Pickens, those are really the only 2 seeing bankable volume on this team. And Warren is expected to return this week. So I'm not sure. I haven't actually added that into the projections, but assuming Warren was out, Najee was projecting as a running back 19. If I had Warren in, he's probably going to go to like 26, 27. It's not going to be great. Now, we'll see if there's reports of Warren being limited, in which case maybe Najee finishes more as like running back 24, 25. But the point is, not a good spot. It's a very low total game. I'm not like the Steelers are an offense to where if they're playing a bad defense or they're playing a team that'll force them to play, they can score fantasy points. Like, they are capable of doing it, but this is probably going to be a slow-paced game. Not many plays, low scoring. In these spots, Pittsburgh is going to play it safe. They're going to run the ball. They're not going to be aggressive downfield. They're going to try and get into the fourth quarter up by 3 and try and sit on the lead. Like, that is going to be their game plan. We want to be attacking Steelers players when the other side is pushing them. And I don't expect the Raiders side to really push anything here. So I don't know that I'd play the running backs. I don't think I'd stream Fields. And Pickens is fine as a wide receiver too. But again, nothing is that appealing on Pittsburgh. Then for the Raiders, as I said, they're probably not going to push, so they're not going to be that great. Aiden O'Connell is starting, but I view that the same as Minshew. They're pretty interchangeable. I wouldn't change anything in the projections. We'll see if Zamir returns. I don't know that he's going to. I don't believe he practiced on Wednesday, but we will see. Myers, Bowers, they're the engine of the offense. I'd leave the running back room alone. Pittsburgh is not a good matchup for Myers, but he's had 2 poor matchups in a row, and honestly, he's done really well in them. He's commanding a massive target share. He is always an underrated wide receiver. Again, not a good matchup. They have really good cornerback play, and I could see him dudding. But if he's going to command 9 or 10 targets in these really difficult spots, once they finally start playing teams that don't have shutdown cornerbacks, he's going to be really good. And he's going to be someone we're attacking in fantasy. Right now, even given the matchup, he's my wide receiver 25. Honestly, if you had to play Myers, even in this matchup, wouldn't be too against that. And then Bowers as well. I think he's just a good enough play, tight end thin enough where I would just play him every week. I could see playing Madison if you are desperate and Zamir misses again, but you better be desperate. I just really don't want to play Alexander Madison. Next up, we've got Falcons at Panthers. Surprisingly high, 47-point total. Falcons, 6-point road favorites. For the Falcons, it's a great matchup. The Panthers are allowing the 2nd most yards per pass play. They're allowing the 6th most rushing yards per game as well. Atlanta should find success no matter how they choose to attack this week. Usually teams do choose to attack on the ground, but no matter how they want to win, they will be winning on offense. So Bijan, London, they're set up really well. I have this graded out as the second best fantasy matchup for running backs. And so far this season, the Panthers have allowed 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is rushing yards only, not even counting receiving yards. 180 rushing yards and 2 scores to the Saints, 219 rushing yards and a score to the Chargers, 55 and a touchdown to the lowly Raiders, and then 141 rushing yards, 2 scores to the Bengals, 128 rushing yards, 3 scores to the Bears. If there were a week for Bijan to finally pay off his ADP, it is this one. And for the wide receivers, London over the last 4 weeks, 6th best volume among all wide receivers. Mooney, 11th best volume. A lot of that comes from their explosion game last week. But still, I think London's a must start. Mooney, if you had to play him in the flex, you can do that. Again, teams typically choose to run the ball a lot. And I could see it where Atlanta wants to establish that ground game, get them going. And they do, and the wide receivers, quote unquote, fail. I don't know how much they can truly fail in this spot, but underperform. But it's a good enough spot where it's like they could also just be like, oh, well, we can win through the air as well. And they get the offense going through there too. So Pitts, tight end 7, Cousins, quarterback 13. Again, I think those 2 specifically have more variance than people are willing to accept, but they still project well. They're still good options this week. Honestly, if you have buys as well, you can throw Algier into the mix too. If you are desperate running back 2, injuries, buys, he's got an okay chance of scoring, okay chance of posting a solid game. Definitely not a lock to go off, of course. He's a backup running back. But as a tiebreaker in general, it's another spot where if it's close, play a Falcons player this week. Then for the Panthers, Chuba, Deontay, those are the only 2 you can really trust right now. I would go back to them this week. Chuba's been rolling. And then Deontay, he took a step back last week, but what do you expect? It was a very, very difficult matchup. He's going to be fine long-term. I have a wide receiver 24 right now. Final 4 o'clock game is the highest total game of the season and one I will be going to. Lions at Cowboys, 52.5-point total. Lions, 3.5-point road favorites coming off of their bye. For the Lions, Gibbs, Monty, St. Brown, Laporta, all weekly must starts. Dallas plays a lot better at home, but those 4 need to be locked into starting lineups every week, especially as favorites in a game with a 52.5-point total. Jameson Williams right now is my wide receiver 28. I'd probably use him in the flex if you had him. He's got a really elite ceiling, and I can promise you, coming off by, they're going to take a few plays this week that's going to be like schemed up usage to get him the ball downfield. Doesn't mean they're going to hit on those plays, but if they're going to have a few of those in there, he's got an elevated chance of having a 50, 60-yard touchdown. You want to be playing wide receivers in a dome with a good matchup. Highest total game of the season so far. Aerial attacks. Like you just want to be playing wide receivers like that in this spot. Goff has underperformed so far this season, but a lot of that's been touchdown variance. Now, on this team, they could run for 4 touchdowns, right? They could score 31 points, including 4 touchdowns, but you have Gibbs and Monty each running 2 in. That can happen, and that's why he has a lower floor. With that being said, if you are an underdog this week and you're looking for streaming matchups, you could also get lucky, right? They could score 31, but they could throw for the 4 touchdowns, and he could have 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. That is in his range of outcomes this week. So if you're streaming, and especially if you are an underdog and you're like, I need ceiling with my quarterback, I would definitely consider rolling with Jared Goff this week. Then for Dallas, this is a smash spot for CeeDee Lamb. Like, not only is he frustrated with the targets, but Detroit is the #1 fantasy matchup for wide receivers, playing in a dome. They don't have Brandon Cooks. Like, this sets up a game where he has 10 for 150 and 2 touchdowns. Behind him, Ferguson, Dak, they should be in starting lineups. Tolbert's my wide receiver 32 this week. Rico running back 28. I don't think either one of them are must starts, but if it's close, again, lean towards this game environment. 52.5 point total, and that's just the average. We could see both teams going north of 30 points in this spot. That's still the less likely outcome, but the point is we're going to see passing volume. We're going to see touchdowns. If you've got a tiebreaker, play the person in this game. Sunday night game is going to be Bengals at Giants, 48 point total, and honestly a surprisingly close 3.5 point spread in favor of the Bengals. For the Bengals, Burrow, Chase, Higgins, all must starts this week. At running back, we will see what it looks like with Zach Moss. When he went down, it was like, man, this kid's going on the IR. Then he goes back into the game, and you're like, wait, what? How did he do that? We'll see if he's able to play this week. As of Wednesday, he did not practice, but we will see on Thursday and Friday. If he is out, play Chase Brown. He'd be a must start. Behind him, you can take a shot on Gesicki, but he's more of a lower end option. I would mostly stick with Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, and then play Brown if Moss is out. And if Moss plays, you would imagine it's because he's good to go, in which case he'd be the same as always, kind of that like low-end running back to a flex option, but you'd be a little bit more wary because he definitely is hurt to some degree. Then for the Giants, Neighbors still in the concussion protocol right now. That's not ideal, right? He's had time to pass it and he hasn't, so that's not great. Not the end of the world. He's got Thursday. He's got Friday. Monitor that situation. If he plays, obviously play him. And then Wandale would be like a kind of a low-end flex play. Slayton had a great game, but he would still also be like a much lower-end flex play. Honestly, Wandale in full PPR would be a solid flex play. In half PPR would be more of a lower-end flex play. If he's out, though, if Neighbors is not able to get cleared concussion protocol, then Wandale would probably be a must-start, especially in full PPR leagues. And then Slayton, again, was great last week. He'd be a strong play in the flex. The Bengals are the 4th best fantasy matchup for wide receivers. At running back, watch the status of Singletary. This is a team where it's like we got to figure out what the running back and wide receiver situations are. If Singletary is out, then Tyron Tracy Jr. is a strong play at running back too. If Singletary does return, honestly, I have no idea what the split is going to be. Both would grade out as much lower end options. We would just have to see what the coaches are saying, what beat reporters are saying as to what the split is expected to be. As of recording this, again, I don't know if Singletary is going to play. Only other player you're looking at is Daniel Jones. He's projecting amazingly in my first run of projections. I'm sure that's going to come down a bit. I really don't want to project him as high as I am right now. And I'm also projecting Neighbors in. Obviously, he'll take a hit if Neighbors is out. But he's projecting as the #1 streaming option this week. Again, I do a huge update on Thursdays. I'm probably going to bump him down in projections, but it's a good spot. They're projected to be trailing. They're playing at home. If Neighbors returns, the Bengals do not have a good defense, and the Bengals are going to score points on offense. He's going to have to be aggressive. He's mobile. Like, it does set up well to where if you had to stream Daniel Jones this week, it's a pretty good option to do so. Again, first round projections, #1 streaming option. Final game of the week, Monday Night Football, Bills at Jets, 41 point total. Bills 2.5 point road favorites. For the Bills, obviously an awful matchup at the Jets, right? You don't want to be doing that. They've also spread the ball around a lot. They've also just played really poorly on offense. So James Cook, running back 14, Kincaid, tight end 9. Pretty much have to play Josh Allen, even if he projects low. But that's it. Even if Shakir plays, I'd bench him. If Shakir is out, I don't want to go to these secondary wide receivers. You're just not playing wide receivers against the Jets if they are not getting a ton of volume. And none of the wide receivers on Buffalo are getting a ton of volume. Then for the Jets, it's a tough matchup for their wide receivers as well, but a relatively neutral one for everyone else. I think you have to keep rolling with Brees. Garrett Wilson kind of just got 22 targets last week. That was absolutely insane to see. Don't think he's getting 22 targets, but anyone capable of 22 targets commanded is a must start in any matchup. With Breece, again, I think you got to kind of just keep rolling with him. I've seen some people talk about how very high blitz rate in these games that he hasn't been very good at, in which case he hasn't been able to like get out, of course, at running back as much. I don't know how much I buy that being the reason that he's underperformed. Like, he still just hasn't been playing very well, right? Like, his yards per carry incredibly low. He's not breaking off long runs. If they are able to anticipate some of these blitzes, he can run into the flat and capitalize on that. So it's like, there are reasons to where it's like, yeah, but like, he's still not playing very well. Regardless, he's going to break out of this at some point. I do think he's going to have a 25-point game sometime in the next month. I think you have to just play him at this point. And in this spot, honestly, it's Breece, it's Wilson. I don't think you touch anyone else on this offense. So if you made it this far, please leave a like. It is greatly appreciated. And if you're down there, why not hit subscribe as well? I've got 4 free videos every week. Next one's coming out on Friday afternoon. Also, if you want to see my exact rankings for every player, especially later in the week when I do more research and when we get more injury news as well, see them on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So good luck to everyone this weekend. That, my friends, is the end of this one, and thanks for watching.